You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just a labor organizer. So I'm always like, I can't, like, I'm talking to workers, like, I can't do this shit by myself. What are your ideas? And then I've been involved in some pretty pitched teacher union battles, and I work for the teachers union this week over here in Oregon. So sleepy old Oregon's getting interesting. I wanted to, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can relate to that though. I know what it's like being negotiating, and that's I remember I was doing that at MICA for a while, and it's a full-time job sometimes. It's a lot of work, just meeting with.
So you've done some of that?
Yeah, we me and 6 other professors at MICA started the first adjunct union at MICA, and it didn't go very well, unfortunately. But I can tell you more about that later. But
oh man, I've done the work for 24 years, union brother. Yeah. Chloe, union sister. So yeah, I love that. That's absolutely incredible. I'm trying to merge. I have two identities. It's podcast art guy and labor guy. Mm-hmm. Those two identities, they're the exact same. I have to show others how they're the exact same. Art, organizing, expression. It gets the shit done. So it's long to try to connect people with that idea, but we're on the way.
There's commonality, definitely.
Yeah. I'm Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast. A super exciting Baltimore episode. Chloe Niclas, who was recently episode 189 of the show. Fantastic episode. It was wonderful to meet Chloe. She's back and his co-host. And we have Alex Fine, whose illustrations in art tap into my particular mind, and so I love looking at them all in the forms of you see with the concert posters and illustration that you do. And I've heard you describe the main task of taking words and what somebody's conveying and try to show what that is. Alex Fine, recording over there from Baltimore to Oregon. Welcome to the show, and happy to have you on.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And Chloe as well. We're going to drop into some illustrator type stuff. I want to tell you something I haven't told either one of you. When my editor and producer, Peter Bauer, who produces this show with union labor, he listened to Chloe's episode, and he was really fascinated because he's listened to and produced every episode. But every once in a while, we've had illustrators on, and both he and I have gotten into this illustrator vibe or something that feels different about it. So I like that we're able to do this here and to develop some of those points. But I wanted to ask you, Alex, when did you see yourself as an artist? When did you walk around and this is who I am? When did that happen?
I think that, like a lot of artists, I think it started when I was really young, when I was in elementary school. I was very fortunate. I had a really great elementary school art teacher, and in elementary school you have the same art teacher from kindergarten through 6th grade, and she, at a very early age, she never talked down to us. She never treated us like we were incapable of understanding certain things. So she was teaching us lessons that I wouldn't learn again till college, and I think she understood something that a lot of elementary school art teachers don't usually understand. And that's when you're young, you absorb information really fast and you're able to learn and process things really fast. And because of her lessons, not only did I become an artist, but there were a lot of students from that elementary school who went on to art careers and won contests. And she really got me thinking like an artist when as early as maybe 7 years old. And she would enter us in local contests, national contests, even international contests. When I was in third grade, I won an art contest in Japan because she sent one of my collages.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
Internationally
and I'll
recognized.
tell you
Very
this
young.
as a teacher myself, when you give a student a taste of real world success, it gives you motivation to keep pursuing it. It makes you think, okay, I'm validated now. There's someone other than my parents thinks I'm good at this, that think that I can actually do something with this. I'm more than just an average artist, you know? And that makes you want to almost become obsessed with it. You think, okay, if I've achieved this success, what's my next milestone? What can I achieve after this? And that's always been sort of my teaching method too. I think she was her name is Ruth Gaynor. I should say her name. She's retired now, but just
Thank you, Ruth Gaynor. Thank you, Miss Gaynor.
Yeah.
No,
So
I mean it's you took my breath away when you're talking about that. I represent teachers every single day, and this show just drops back so much times when I ask this question of both inspiring and less inspiring or damaging experiences in this realm. And one of the most powerful statements I saw it on a poster. It shows up every once in a while. My teacher said I was smart, and I was smart. My teacher said I was an artist. I was an artist. And there's just something so inspiring, I think, connected to what you're talking about. I just wanted to mention that. Thank you for that. I just had one quick question too, and you said you teach. What do you teach, and what's that experience like?
So when the pandemic started, I took let's say an extended sabbatical because I realized how difficult it was to teach any kind of art over Zoom or through kind of tele methods. So right now I'm actually thinking about maybe starting to apply to different colleges again. But I taught Micah, I taught the Corcoran, and my first teaching jobs were actually at the Maryland College of Art and Design, which is it was a small art school in Silver Spring, Maryland. And
I used to live in Silver Spring.
Oh yeah, it was right near the Forest Glen Metro. If you're familiar with that area.
Know that metro stop well.
Oh yeah, and it was a great experience. I was actually still a student at this school, and they gave me summer classes to teach the children, and it was amazing. And then eventually, I started teaching continuing ed classes to senior citizens at night. And keep in mind, when I was probably 20 years old when I started, and I looked like I was 12 years old back then because I think. Maybe during the pandemic, my aging started to progress more. But
he caught up. Damn.
Yeah, up until about 6 years ago, I still looked like I was 12 years old, I think. And so it was a fun experience teaching senior citizens when I looked like a 12-year-old. Well, a 12-year-old with tattoos, But it must be a strange reality for these 80, 85-year-old art students. But after one class, they realized I think they realized I knew what I was talking about, so it was okay. But teaching college was always my favorite, my favorite teaching experience because when you teach college, it's almost like you take a mentor role too, because these are students that you're going to keep, instructing even after they're not your students anymore. These are people that you're going to stay in touch with the rest of your life, I think. And there's something special about teaching college too. But I'd say I'd be open to even teaching elementary school to hopefully be as influential as my elementary school art teacher was, because I just, I know teaching elementary school though is also a lot more stressful than teaching college. I don't think they pay elementary school teachers nearly enough money to do what they do because you have so many students and you have so many personalities that haven't yet fully developed. And I think to be able to reach these kids at that age is a really special trait that these teachers have.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex. And Chloe, in order to interrupt this bro fest, and I'm sorry, things happen in Silver Spring and comic books and Golden Girls and amen. So Chloe, part of part of in approaching this episode, we're just talking about, illustration. And as you know, when we had our conversation, Chloe, I was just really enthralled by the ideas that were captured in your images, and just really thrilled by those. So I've connected to recently just the power of illustration, and just opened my mind and understanding your process and such more. So I wanted to thank you for co-hosting, and in order to actually co-host, I have to let you co-host.
Oh, thanks.
I'm passing the baton because I just did a sprint there. So
cool. Thanks so much, Ken. It's great it's really kind of you to have me on as a co-host. So Alex, one of the things that I was noticing about your work, you did a magnet set of the Golden Girls, and I was so excited by that. I was like, oh my God, that just excited everything. Like any young child or anybody who's beyond that age that's such a fun experiment. What experience did you, what was it like doing that project?
Well, it was really fun because I had just done a few other Golden Girls jobs. Like for a moment there, I felt like I was like the Golden Girls illustrator, which I can't imagine a more fun moniker to have is Golden Girls illustrator. But so I'd done this job for Hulu and Tumblr, which was a promotion to kind of celebrate the release of all 7 seasons on Hulu. And it was sort of like a series of animated GIFs, and which was a lot of fun to draw too. And I got that job right as I was making the transition from traditional illustration to digital illustration. So I feel like I was kind of feeling my way around custom digital brushes at the time. And when I got another Golden Girls job, I was like, okay, now I'm a little more settled into digital, so I can really, really make them shine now, and I can really like do them justice. So my next Golden Girls job was a book for Harper. No, I'm sorry. It was a book for Penguin Workshop. And it was a Christmas book about the Golden Girls. It was like a night before Christmas, but it was taking place in Miami. And it was about like a horrible rainstorm, and they were afraid it was going to be a hurricane. And Blanche went out for the night because that's what Blanche does. And, so it was a really fun book. And it was a great experience working with them. So right after that, I got the magnet job, and I was like, oh, this is great. Just keep the Golden Girls jobs coming. And I felt like it was the perfect timing because I had drawn them so much that I felt like I could draw them from memory at that point. And when they told me the premise of the project, when I got the brief, in the email, I was like, this is perfect because I got to draw all the characters full body. I got to draw all of their accessories, like their drinks and purses and, sport jackets with shoulder pads and things like that. And then, wicker furniture. It was like a dream come true doing that kind of work. And what was also cool is they had me draw 2 backdrops. They had me draw the lanai with all of the patio furniture, and they had me draw the kitchen. And what I loved about drawing the kitchen was they had all of these cake molds on the wall. Like you might notice it if you look at the kitchen interior. They have all of these, like, they kind of look like copper cake molds, and they're all over the walls. So unfortunately, the magnet set was really tiny, so I couldn't get too much into the details.
Right.
But I loved to try to get as much detail as I could at the size that I was drawing. And I've never really been like the kind of illustrator that draws like elaborate backgrounds. So for me, it was kind of a challenge, and that was also fun too. I love challenging assignments. I love it when I get an assignment that kind of takes me out of my comfort zone. And so I got to draw like the wallpaper and the floor patterns and all of the appliances on the countertops, and it was a lot of fun. It was a good experience, and I have to say the best part of that job was going to my friends' houses sometimes and seeing them on their refrigerators and them not even knowing that I did the artwork. That just means they just bought it because they liked it and they saw it somewhere. And I know they were selling it at Atomic Books in Hamden. And I know a lot of my friends shop at Atomic because it's an amazing bookstore. And so going to people's houses for like dinner parties or just like randomly being at people's houses I don't even know and seeing the magnets it was a lot of fun just seeing my work out in the wild, as they say.
I was going to ask you if you had done the backdrops to them too. So I'm glad that you let me know that you did.
Oh yeah, it was so much fun. Like just drawing all the plants on the lanai and the
What
the Miami background. Yeah.
what was and which part of that did you say was challenging? Was it just like all of the details, or just fitting everything in there that was relevant,
Well,
that needed to be in there?
Well, for me, and this is something I really respect and appreciate about your work, is that being able to compose a scene with accurate angles, with an accurate perspective. That's like, to me, the most challenging thing, because even if you have all of the background knowledge of 1 point, 2 point perspective, horizon lines, vanishing points, things like that, when you actually have to execute a background, when you have to draw everything in correct proportions and perspectives, it can be challenging because it's all about consistency. You have to make sure that if there's shadows, the shadows are consistent. If there's lights, the lights are consistent. And so for me, I got way inside my head when I was doing these backgrounds, where I was like, this doesn't really look completely accurate. But I also thought to myself, these are just going to have magnets that are not in scale whatsoever to the backgrounds. So I kind of let myself be okay with it not being 100% accurate. But if this was like an editorial illustration or an ad campaign, I would have probably made sure everything was 100% to scale, and I would have made all of my grids and made sure everything was perfect. But in this case, I felt a little more relaxed because the nature of this is like the purse magnet is like, it would be a giant purse if it was going with the person, because they wanted all of the accessories to be detailed enough to be large enough to be able to be like recognizable, I guess. Yeah. So that kind of put me more at ease. That it doesn't have to be 100% perfectly accurate in terms of perspective and angles.
Yeah. Very cool. It looked like it was a lot of fun to do.
Oh, it was a great job. The more Golden Girls jobs I get, the better. But I have to say though, lately I've been doing a lot of Bob Ross jobs, and I feel like Bob Ross and Golden Girls are sort of like hand in hand. So I think the thing is, I've always considered myself a Mr. Rogers type person, so maybe I'm getting all of the wholesome content now. I don't know. I think I'm just like, I'm not I don't think people think of me as like an edgy artist, so maybe I'm getting all the happy little clouds, happy little, TV sitcom jobs. I don't know.
This is like, there's so much content in this episode in so many directions. And that's just so fascinating to hear about. And for me, listening and learning from it, there's actually been for me, I just bought the book. I found a hardcover copy of it. I had a paperback of Must Be Classic, Perspective Made Easy.
Oh yeah.
This classic book. I thought it was a life help manual, and I purchased it. But it turns out it's an illustration manual. So yeah. So I was just looking at all these terms, and I just want to tell you, just so you know how I hear this. Mm-hmm. I've never shown proficiency in representing what's out there in any sort of way with representational components. That's not part of any of my process or how I've developed my abilities. And when I paint, it's abstract and not really controllable in a way I can understand. So one radical thing happened to me. I forget if I mentioned this to you, Chloe, but I was taking an art class, first time in my life, organized art class a couple months ago. I've never had an art class in my life. And, or like little workshops and stuff. And it was over a couple months. And Susie DeVille, who's been on this show, had you got to copy, illustrate, draw. I want to make sure I get it right. Upside down.
Oh,
so the image is upside down.
Yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
And you know what happened?
What?
I could illustrate.
Yes.
I had never been asked. Now I'm not in the galleries or nothing like that. I'm saying that I could do what was there, and I could never do what was there before. Somebody flipped it, and my brain said, oh, somebody turned it the right way. Whatever's going on with my brain, whatever. It's complicated. And now it's the right way. And I started, and I've just done 2 or 3. I did an elephant. I would always finish what I was trying to represent that was out there by my hand and be like, fucking hate this shit. Yeah. Like, because I always wanted to, like, I didn't have a good relationship. I wanted to, what's out there? I want to capture down there with my hand. Maybe I can now with like whatever happened with that. It's that radical. So I'm like 2 months into illustration in my life, and I'm 50.
Yeah.
That's a very common exercise. I had that one too when I was very young. And the way that works is that you're kind of unlearning. There's a difference between drawing what you're actually seeing versus drawing what you think you're seeing.
Oh.
So when you're when you're actually like looking at something and trying to replicate it exactly like just beginning, it's likely not going to look exactly like that in the beginning because you don't know exactly how all of the shapes, you don't know how all of the objects work in 3D space yet. But when you're doing it upside down, you don't even know what the image is. So your brain isn't trying to make you draw something that isn't actually what you're seeing.
Wow. Thank you. Wow. That's incredible. The one other thing connected to this too, that is just the only other thing that I would illustrate that would be completely obsessive, duplicated within environments, loved doing it, loved what I see when I did it, all geometric shapes. And my partner now, Jenny, we talked about this like when we first, meeting each other, and we had like done that or shown that. I looked at hers and I was like, yo, like, what did you do there? And she had done that. And then somebody later explained to me they did a psychological read, which I liked. It was cool. I love hearing about these ideas. They're like, well, I'm in a union meeting. I'm like, got all these conflicts, nothing but conflicts sometimes. And I'm doing these geometric shape with perfect angles and cutting this way and trying to do shading that way. And you're ordering your life. You have no control of this fucking mess that's in front of you. Your brain's trying to show you that things can be pieced together somehow. I'm like, probably. But I was fascinated. I'm just fascinated by that because it's just a reflection of my mind and in a very uneven experience with developing what y'all talking about. I just sit there and be like, keep talking for 3 hours about what you do.
Well, it's funny that exercise is really good because, like Chloe said, it's about, it's partially about unlearning, and it's partially about not kind of coming up with your own like image of what you think something looks like. And I've noticed that as an artist, as I think as any artist, but specifically as an illustrator, for me, it's like, as you get older, you don't want to have the same style your whole life. You want to keep evolving, keep adapting to changing trends and things like that. And so I've noticed that being an artist is it's like a constant state of unlearning. You have to constantly get out of your own like kind of style or your own sort of rigid way of thinking and visualizing things, because I can't name you one artist that just kept the same style throughout their whole career, their whole life. And you constantly have to, I think it's weird. It's like almost like a paradox. You have to like unlearn to learn something, to learn how to see things different, you have to unlearn the way you've always seen them to begin with. And so it can be frustrating too. Like you were saying before, you felt like you were never an illustrator. You could never draw representational. And it's, because it's like when you're younger, when you're a young art student, they make you do blind contour drawings. And basically you look at something and you don't look at your paper while you're drawing. And the whole point is you're supposed to be drawing what you're seeing, not just looking at your paper and trying to remember what you saw. Because if you remember what you saw, you're going to draw, like, let's say you draw a hand. You're going to draw a hand like you imagine hands look, not what they actually look like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the paradox, because like when you do a blind contour drawing, it looks like an abstract drawing because you're not seeing what you're doing. You can't look at your paper. But what it's doing is it's training your brain to really make observations on what you're looking at and notice what that specific hand looks like, not what you think that hand looks like. And so, yeah, I would definitely encourage you to keep doing these exercises that really make you, strengthen your observational skills, because representational art, I think, starts with a foundation in observation more than just learning how something should look. You have to like kind of observe it yourself and figure those things out for yourself.
Alex, when you were, many people might not know about your graphite portraits, but like when you were starting out, did your work look more like that, and then you like transitioned into the look that you have now? Like, how did that come about? Because that was a lot more about representational. I mean, there's still like some stylization going on in them, but it's still like a lot more like three-dimensional feeling. So how did you like get from there?
Oh, definitely. So it all started when I was a kid. Like, I loved realistic illustrations. Like, my favorite artist, it's like if you ask a painter who their favorite painter is, and they say Picasso, you'd be like, well, that's a pretty basic, answer, But for me, it's like I always say Norman Rockwell. It's like Norman Rockwell is my favorite illustrator, and I know he's like probably the most famous illustrator ever, and it sounds like a very simple answer, but I just, my whole life, up until college, was me trying to recreate Norman Rockwell's style. Because I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand how someone could draw and paint so realistically and so naturally while still like exaggerating forms just enough to give life to these drawings. And I just didn't understand it. Back then, before I really learned about art, I didn't realize that he was exaggerating. I thought he was just looking at people or photographs and just copying them identically. I thought that's how you do that. You just copy what you see. And going back to what we were just saying about representational, but what makes artists like Norman Rockwell and countless other illustrators so successful is they take an image and they exaggerate just slightly, so that maybe like an arm is a little longer, or a leg is a little longer, or an expression is a little more animated, so that it really makes it come alive and actually elevates it higher than a photograph. A photograph you can edit in Photoshop and different programs, but honestly, it's if you just take a photograph and just alter the levels of things, you're not going to get a sense of what it was like in the moment when that photograph was taken. But an illustrator has the ability to bring these representational images to life more by exaggerating a bit, by adding a little more life to them. And I think that's what Norman Rockwell did. He was just a master of, like, if he drew someone running, they looked like they were running. It wasn't just a snapshot. It was like you really felt the energy in his illustrations. So I spent so much time trying to figure out how to capture that. And it wasn't until later on that I realized what he was doing. And by that time, though, I'd gotten into so many other illustrators. Like I loved like Kent Williams and James Jean and Yuko Shimizu and Nathan Fox and all of these amazing illustrators. And so I feel like my style became almost a hybrid of all of theirs. Well, and I don't want to insult them, because my work did not look as good as theirs when I was in college. I don't want them to look at my work as a younger illustrator and be like, he was influenced by me, But not to be self-deprecating, but it's so what happened was, though, I think you become a culmination of all of your influences, pretty much, and so I feel like where I start out trying to do realistic, and my work was very graphite based, charcoal based. I love compressed charcoal and graphite. I use from a 6H to a 6B pencil and my kneaded eraser. And I have to be honest, I never stopped loving that. So as I got older, I developed that style more while I was developing a pen and ink style, because my favorite illustrator when I got to college was Charles Burns. I just loved how he used light and dark. You asked me earlier about comics. Black Hole was one of my favorite comics too.
Yeah, rock and roll here.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And just there's so many great he made a lot of small graphic novels too, and so I got really into Charles Burns, and that led me to Daniel Clowes and
I adore Clowes. Oh
yeah.
Sorry for the showstopper piece there.
Oh, definitely.
I have a dirty, semi-dirty story related to Daniel Clowes. We have to get into that later on. Go ahead.
Sure, definitely. And I have to say, Daniel Klaus, I met him at a book sign in DC, and I was afraid to meet him because
I'd be.
just like a lot of artists, you kind of judge them based on their work. And when you're a graphic novel artist and a comic artist, you put a lot of yourself into these, stories. So I was just like, man, based on some of his, I remember the first Daniel Klaus graphic novel I read was David Boring. And I thought to myself, it's like, man, the person who wrote this must be a really interesting person, And then I had the same thing with Charles Burns. And I thought to myself, God, I don't know. It's like, should I meet this person, or are they going to be like really aggressive? Are they going to be really like eccentric? But Daniel Klaus was like the nicest guy in the world. He had a line out the door all the way down the street. It was at Poetry and Prose in DC. And it was just, he stayed the whole time. I remember afterwards I went to Comet Ping Pong, which is like right across the street, I think, or maybe down the street.
You're killing me, bro. You're killing me, bro.
Oh yeah. And after I ate my pizza, I went back to I was with my friend Rico, and we went back to his car, and there was still a line. He was still signing books, and I was just like, that's a good artist. That's a good person who's just going to stay until the line is done, because a lot of artists don't do that. I've been to book signings where they're like, I'm going to be here for 1 hour, and then if the hour goes by and you haven't got signed, tough luck. But he stayed there the whole time until every last person, got through the line. And he was just really nice. And, it's weird because I have to do a little aside here. When I met my wife, Chloe, her name is also Chloe. And
got confused there for a moment. Thank you.
Yeah. Unfortunately we're, separated at the moment, and that's okay. We're still really good friends. That's
great.
But I remember when we first started going out, she didn't know that I had drawn all of these posters that were on her wall, like at her apartment. And so like the first time I saw her apartment, I was like, oh, where'd you get these posters? 'Cause some of them were like 5-6 years old. I mean, they were from like 2000, and we started dating in 2005. I was like, and I knew I had to be the one that handed her the flyer because I was the only one passing out flyers to these shows. So it's just like, oh, I did all of these. And she's like, I had no idea. And she's like, I always pictured the guy who did these being like 6'6" with like a big like green mohawk and like a tattooed neck and stuff. And I was just like, nah, I'm just like a dorky artist, I mean, I do have tattoos and stuff, but I'm like a short, skinny guy who, wears button-up shirts and, is like not a very shocking looking person, and that always struck me because I thought about that with other artists I know. Sometimes like I think artists use their work as an outlet for the things that they think, but they don't say. And it made me wonder, it's like, am I thinking all of these things and I'm putting them in my posters, but I'm too like inhibited to actually say these things out loud? And I think a lot of artists are like that. I thought about that with Daniel Klaus. I was just like, maybe his comics are an outlet for the things that he thinks, but in civil society, you don't actually say out loud, And it's not like anything his graphic novels are that over the top or anything, but I noticed that with a lot of like artists, a lot of comic book artists, they put things in their stories that they probably wouldn't like express in the real world. And, I always wondered that about myself, because I'm a very polite guy, I'm a very like, as my grandparents would say, I think I'm a mensch, I'm just like, I'm not the kind of guy that would be like aggressive or mean to anyone. But my artwork was like, some of it was like a little like crazy. And I'm just like, man, maybe I'm part of that too. Maybe there's a part of me that I don't feel comfortable expressing in the real world.
Yeah.
But I put in my artwork,
No, it's that's I love I'm a huge Klaus fan myself. I got to tell the stories just so I don't forget it. And this is a secret bookstore story, so I'm not gonna share the location now, but I'll tell you the what's what about the Daniel Klaus and the smut. So Daniel Klaus' mom had an extensive collection of kind of kinky romance, the underground books, paperbacks, like classic, like kind of cool looking, underground cheap ones. And so where you get these in the collection, Clowes had drawn and illustrated in many of these books, maybe connected to what's going on in the story. So where you try to get these, you purchase them and be like, I'll buy Daniel Clowes' mom's smut book, paperback, Pulp Fiction, and maybe you'll get Daniel Clowes originals within it. So I bought a few. No, I bought 2 or 3. I didn't get any illustrations. So it would have been a better story without that. Maybe it wasn't such a great story. But anyways, there is a chance to get discrete young Daniel Clowes illustrations through purchasing Pulp Fiction collection of his mom. So
I would love a young Dan Clowes smut drawing in a paperback. That would be awesome. I mean, it's just like, I love seeing artwork done by, well-known artists when they were younger. It's fun to see like their evolution and see how they develop. And yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah.
It could be a book selling ploy, both of you. I mean, I don't know. They could be like, they didn't say 1 in 100. They just said it's from the collection. You used to illustrate in them. So
unfortunately, my mom threw away, I think, all my old artwork from when I was a kid. So there's no young Alex drawings out there, I don't think.
All right. So there goes that market. Yeah. Alex, wanted to ask you this, and wanted to ask you, what is art? We're talking all this stuff. We're talking Golden Girls, Amen, illustration process, pencils, charcoal, erase. What is art?
That's always a hard question to answer because it's so specific to the person who makes the art, I think, or the person who interprets the art. But I think that actually is kind of what it is. I think, to me, like, art is taking a personal perspective, like a unique perspective, and figuring out a way to communicate it. And that communication isn't always meant to be even fully understood. I think that as an illustrator, I feel like, we're often like, interpreters for other people's perspectives. Someone else writes a piece, for a magazine or a newspaper, and then our job is to read it, analyze it, dissect it, and then figure out a way to create a visual for that. So that's a very specific kind of art. But I think art in general, I think we're all just, it's hard to be a human without interpreting everything around us 24 hours a day. Even in our sleep, we're interpreting things. Even if in our subconscious, we're taking bits and pieces of our days and figuring out how to make sense of them. So to me, like, art is just making sense of everything around us and trying to let other people know how we make sense of it. And so illustration is a little different sometimes because you can be an illustrator that makes personal work. Like, we're just talking about Daniel Clowes. I mean, even though he's a comic artist, his work, I think, is very illustrative. He's illustrating his perspective of the world, and whether it's fictional or autobiographical, it's still the way he sees things. So I think we're all doing that, whether you're a filmmaker, whether you're a writer, whether you're, a comedian. I think these are all art forms, and we're all just expressing our perspectives on the world.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I run into the problem chatting with you, Alex, is I get so enthralled, and I have like a proper role of hosting. So I'm always like pulling in, and I got to make sure that they were still running this thing, the right way. Chloe, when you look at Alex's stuff as an illustrator, and you'd be like, I want to talk to him, and we want to talk to Alex. What is it? What is it when you look at his stuff as an illustrator that you're like, that's dope? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing I think, and this is something that most illustrators go through when they're, developing their work early on, is like, you have such a consistent, distinctive style, and yet, like, you also kind of try different things out too. And I'm just curious, like there's a few different things going on with your style. Like there's these kind of clean lines, and then there's like some like more subtle, like broken up lines. And then there's like sort of I don't know how to describe it. Like I don't want to say grunge, but like there's like like some roughness going on in the background sometimes too, like subtle like things like that. And I'm just curious, like how did that all come together? How did you land on these things that so clearly identify your work?
It's like when I was saying earlier that my work, and I think a lot of artists' work is sort of like a hybrid of a lot of different styles that influence them. I think that's kind of how I landed where I am at my current style. Is that when I first started out after art school, I was really into artists like Charles Burns, and I want everything to be clean. I want, like, one thing about Charles Burns is his lines are super clean. It's just like you can't even believe a human being made that with like a paintbrush and ink, but because it's just so precise, it almost looks like vector work, And so I was obsessed with cleanliness back then. I wanted my lines to be clean, but the problem I was coming into was there's only one Charles Burns, and as hard as I tried, I couldn't get my lines to be as clean as his, as precise. I feel like they were clean, they were good lines and everything, but I wasn't getting to where I wanted to get. And I noticed that my work it had like a flatness to it. It just wasn't really coming to life. But I started to realize that all of my favorite artists were silkscreen, print artists, And the great thing about silkscreens is there's always like an unintentional texture to a silkscreen poster. There's something's a little off register. Maybe the ink doesn't completely attach to the tooth of the paper. And I started noticing, it's like, how can I recreate that digitally? Because I knew, like, I was toying around with dry brush before and trying to get that effect, but I couldn't control it that well, and it was always just hit or miss. So once my friend Kyle Webster started developing his Photoshop brushes, I noticed that he had a whole dry media set. I was like, wow, this is like dry brush, but I can control exactly how I want it to look. So I started getting more into textured effects through digital illustration on my tablet in Photoshop. And then when I realized that I could use textures to make my lines too, I kind of ditched trying to do the clean lines. I kind of doubled down on the messy lines. And what I realized was I could create work that almost looked like etchings too. Yeah. Because one of my favorite artists of all time is Franklin Booth. I loved Franklin Booth's, just the way he saw the world, the environments, the way he drew clouds. He drew these like really puffy clouds with tons of layers. But the great thing about him was, and I didn't realize this, was that he wasn't an etcher. He was a pen and ink artist. But he loved artists like Albrecht Dürer and thought that those pieces of art were done with pen and ink. So he became obsessed with recreating etching styles, but by hand, because he didn't know. I don't think he was familiar with etching. And so I kind of got really into that kind of challenge of trying to create like broken line illustrations, textured line illustrations, but still have it be clean in the sense that the lines are still precise. They're just textured and broken. And so for me, like, nothing makes me happier than when I print my own work and it looks like something that was off register, or a little bit like the ink got dry, or the colors are a little like pulled off the paper. And we live in a wonderful time right now where you can do these things digitally, where you don't have to have happy accidents. You can have complete control over what you're doing. If you don't like the way your texture looks, you can erase it and put new textures in. You can actually add like filters and stuff after. And some might say, well, that's cheating. It's like, it's the happy accidents that make art, exciting and unique. But the thing is, there's a poster artist, Frank Kozik, and he was being interviewed once, and the person interviewing him said, it's like, what do you say to people who, think that you're just like, you're taking the easy way out, you're cheating when you're coloring in Photoshop, or you're tracing images, or this or that. And he said, all I care about is what the final product looks like. I don't care how I get there, as long as the final art looks good to me. And I think, I think that's what it's all about. As long as you're not infringing on other people's copyrighted, or copyrighted artwork, their intellectual property. If you can create an original piece of art, I've always been of the mind that I don't care how someone creates the art, as long as it's original and it looks good, Yeah. And I kind of that's always been my mentality. So when they create like a new technology to have you create original art, I'm all for it. I don't care if it cuts corners or is a shortcut. Now, I have a totally different opinion on AI art, because I think AI art is infringing on people's original content. But I think, when it comes to using tools that are actual tools for making art, I think all tools are fair game. I just don't see AI as a tool. I think of it more as like, when you click a filter in Instagram and change your face, it's like, I wouldn't call that art. I would call that just something fun to play with, but it's not really like, I don't know. I guess I get a little upset when someone's like, I typed in words that I want my art to look like and just create a piece of art. I'm just like, well, you're using a lot of other artists' work to create and you're having a computer collage it together, because it's not even a collage that's made by like an actual person. It's just a I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent. This is something about me. Whenever I do a podcast, I always end up like 100 miles away from the original question. So I apologize.
No, this has been coming up on the show, and it's really in this territory around, AI and where it's derived from. I mean, I even became fascinated with the ideas when female artists would report, because there within some of these formats there's such a male gaze. It's like, I didn't even type in breasts, but everything, it like came out like this, so it's like a duplication of kind of social constructs, or whoever's putting that together. It's, I don't know, I guess we could drop into that whole thing. Chloe, I think you have something to say.
I was just gonna say, I mean, it's the thing about AI is like, it can only pull from what has already been made out there. It can't like come up with something new. So I think like the strong case for humans is that we do come up with things that are new, and AI just pulls from everything that already exists out there. So yeah, it does feel repetitive in that sense. I can't even draw hands. Like you can't. I mean, you've seen the examples, Alex. I don't know if you've seen them, Ken, but there are examples where a piece of AI art, like everything about it looks like it was executed well, and then you zoom in on the hands, and it's like a bunch of broken fingers and
extra fingers, and
like there's just, because
it's like a Goya all of a sudden when you look closely.
Right. Because it's thinking differently than humans are thinking. Because if a human were drawing that, they would be like, thinking it through all the way with the hand and everything. That's how you tell the difference right now, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one day the technology, I mean, it could be one day really soon that they improve the technology, but the only way they can improve it is to look at other artists' work. AI still can't think, it doesn't have a consciousness. It can't really it can't think of why the art should look the way it does. It just copies the thousands of other illustrations. And I found out that my illustrations, I'm sure yours are too, Chloe, are in these databases that they pull from to learn how to make the art. And there could be a day when the AI does replace us commercially. But the thing is, the AI won't be able to interpret the world like I was saying before. It's not going to be able to know why it's doing this. It's not going to have a unique perspective on the world. It's just going to have a perspective based on some algorithm that is based on other people's perspectives. So there's always going to have to, I think there's always going to have to be a human component to everything, technological, but it's still scary as a commercial artist though, because as we know, everything is about a bottom line. A company, if they can get an illustration for half the price because it's AI, unfortunately, they're going to do it. It's as long as it saves them money. And so I'm a little afraid about the future, I have to be honest. But right now, I still think they haven't perfected it enough to replace human artists, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, big. Just such a huge topic. And I remember, talking about maybe it's in philosophy class quite some time ago, to kind of artificial intelligence, you can, and science side, and all that. I tell you, one thing I was thinking of amongst this conversation, and I'm thinking about a whole bunch of things, but one thing was pretty cool that I had forgotten. I had interviewed April March, who's name as an animator illustrator was Eleanor Blake, and I just became fascinated because I forgot about this whole component because April March she works and does like French pop songs, and if you see the movie Death Proof by Tarantino, she did the Chick Habit song, singing in French, very catchy groove and all that type of stuff. But she was the lead animator illustrator for Ren and Stimpy.
Oh yeah.
As well, and it was just so mind blowing because I was such a an audio, I'm just listening to her songs. I think her French pop songs are just so groovy. I'd want to talk to you, but then there was this whole illustrator, animator. I'm not familiar with the terms. I would say drawing animator, lead animator for Ren and Stimpy was just bizarre, surreal, display. And I think after having done so many episodes, I just remained deeply fascinated when I'm having this one type of conversation, and then it's whoa, it's way over here, and that too with high proficiency, and it's just really thrilling, and it's really thrilling to hear about your process and thinking, the AI. And when I've talked about this, it's there is no autonomous AI hand yet, unless I don't know something. An autonomous hand that is digital, that creates without what you're saying, pulling from Chloe's work, Alex's work, other illustrators' work that's in its database. And that's so when we ask what is art for, it's I think one of the responses is art's made by humans, yo. That's I mean, there's a political angle to it.
I always try to look at things from both sides, and when I think about AI, the way AI learns is the way a human artist does learn too. I mean, it is pulling from other people's art, but the difference between AI and a human is we're not actually going to take actual components of someone else's art and put it into our illustrations. But we remember other people's art. I don't know if you've done this, Chloe, but there were times when I was learning illustration where I would have folders on my computer of artists I was inspired by, and if there was one artist who was let's say good at drawing trees, I would open up a image of their tree, and I would try to kind of be influenced by it when I would draw my own trees. So it wasn't that I was actually taking the actual art, but I was looking at someone else's art just to kind of figure out how they see things and how they execute drawing something specific. And I think that's what a lot of us do as illustrators is we're inspired by certain artists. And then eventually when we develop our own style, it doesn't look like there's any more. But when we're learning, I think we have to see other art to learn how to make original art. And I think that's what AI does in a sense, but what they're doing actually is taking the actual art and putting it into theirs. So when you see a portrait that's AI generated, you can sometimes even see signatures from artists in the portrait because they're literally pulling a chunk of that illustration and putting it in theirs. So I think that's what's so offensive to me when it comes to AI art. It's not that they're just learning by looking at other people's art. They're actually taking the actual art and putting it into their imagery. And so, and that doesn't fly in the illustration world. You can't just, you can't take a James Jean illustration and be like, hey, I like that face. I'm just going to put it somewhere in my illustration.
Right.
But that's kind of what AI does, I think, from what I understand. I might be understanding AI wrong, but that's kind of how I see it, is that they're just collaging, the illustrations from other people's work and making one kind of collage, original, well, not original, an illustration that's kind of collaged from older illustrations. From
it's like a new image or a new concept, but with actual chunks of it from others. Yeah, I think you're right that we all do learn from each other as we're developing and everything, and then I think you reach a point where you're like, well, I would do this and this differently. I think this and this could be better about the way that they did that, and I would like to do this and this. You start to develop your own set of goals for your own work and your own visions that you have, and you might still have like similar interests and influences to somebody else, but like you still have certain things that you want to do in your own work that are most likely going to be different from other people's who might share some of the same influences as yourself.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's what's great about human made art is that it's like every illustration is like a fingerprint. It's like, it might look like, if you just look at a bunch of fingerprints, you're like, these all just look like fingerprints. They all look the same. But there's little nuances to everyone's work that's different. And that's why like no two illustrators are exactly alike. Even if you tried your best your whole life to recreate someone else's style, it's never going to be exactly like someone else's.
Right.
And that's
it's
what's
impossible.
Great.
Yeah.
I thank you for this thrill. I wanted to talk about just before we jump into why is there something rather than nothing. I wanted to I'm reaching you. I'm over in the woods in the strange territory of Oregon. Boy, I could tell you some stories. It's the most proper place for me at some times, but far across the country, and it's cloudy. The sun came out for the first day in about 10 days out this way. I ran around like a maniac all day. I got some electric scooter. I was going down the road as fast as I could. I mean, it was wonderful. I love Baltimore. I used to visit. I've lived in DC. I'm from Rhode Island. And I'm a Red Sox fan. I'm going to drop that in there. Full disclosure. But I adore Baltimore. I grew up in an industrial city, Pawtucket, Rhode Island. I feel comfortable around Baltimore. I used to visit Fells Point. Remember taking a train to visit Poe's grave, Johns Hopkins. I just going up there for that. I really love the city. And part of the reason I bring this up is as I've talked to artists in different places, like I had an episode with Nick Friesen up in Winnipeg because I happen to be fascinated with Winnipeg, and I'm a big Winnipeg Jets fan for reasons that are probably confusing. But I like to get into the scene or hear like what the feel is a bit about like what's going on with the illustration and or music and art. I live near Portland. It's an hour drive for me into Portland. I go to Portland at least once a week, see a lot of shows, a lot of art. Oh, yeah. Portland's a weird place, but there's a vibe, and I try to express some of those things. So, what's going on in Baltimore? What do you see there nowadays? And with your sensitivity as an artist, like what do you pick up on some of that? Do you transfer some of that in your work? Both of you. Do
you want to go first?
No, I'm going to let you go first because I'm very much a hermit. So I bet you know more about this than I do.
Well, I'm a hermit nowadays. Like because I lived in Baltimore City for about 16 or 17 years, and then I moved up to the county. I'm in Pikesville now, which is a little bit north, like 20 minutes north of the city. But when I was younger though, I felt like I've played in bands since I was like 14, like a lot of like punk bands and garage rock bands and Baltimore is like the music scene and the visual art scene kind of go hand in hand. And a lot, my first art show ever was at a music venue here in Baltimore called the Auto Bar. And, it was all just my posters for shows. Cause, one of the owners of Auto Bar asked me if I would just be their exclusive poster artist, that year. So I made it my senior thesis at Micah. I just did all concert posters. And,
Dang.
And then it kind of culminated in an art show, at the upstairs bar in the venue. And it was such a great night, though, because I hadn't done any real professional work up until then. I was being hired to do these posters for the venue, but I hadn't done any editorial work yet or anything like that. And so I have this show, and my band played. I had a rockabilly band back then. It was
yes, love that rockabilly.
We actually called it psychobilly. It's kind of like more on the punk side than
I'm down. It's cool.
Yeah, so we were called the Alphabet Bombers, and we got our name from the movie Crybaby, the John Waters movie, because in the movie,
all right. The source material is sound. I'm seeing. Okay, go ahead.
Definitely. So Johnny Depp's character Crybaby, like his father was a serial bomber called the Alphabet Bomber. So we called our band that. It was like I had a huge pompadour back then. I had the Johnny Depp look back then. And so at this show, at my art show, like my band played, and as soon as we got done playing, I saw John Waters was at the bar. And I was like, this is awesome. John Waters is at like my art show with my band that was inspired by his movie. So of course I had to go to the bar and be like, hey, I didn't even care about my artwork at that point. I was just like, hey, my band's called the Alphabet Bombers. We got it from your movie. So he was really nice. And he went to a whole history of, there was a real Alphabet Bomber apparently who it wasn't such a nice story because he was bombing like airports and barbershops or whatever, all in alphabetical order. But then after that, I think I actually grabbed his hand and dragged him over to my artwork so I could show my artwork too, because I was like a really excited super fan.
Yeah, get over here. Yeah.
And he was probably just like, I really regret coming to this art show now. But so after he left, there's this guy shooting pool, and he was just like, it's like, yeah, I liked your band a lot. I was like, oh, that's cool. I also did the artwork on the walls. You should check it out. So it turns out he was the art director of the Baltimore City paper. And
yeah.
And he that night he gave me my first editorial job.
Lovely.
He had me do a cover for the City paper for their holiday issue. And
Hells yeah.
I was freaking out because the year before, Shepard Fairey did the cover for their holiday issue, and I was a huge Shepard Fairey fan back then. And this was like 4 years before he did the Obama Hope poster. I just knew him from the Andre the Giant, stickers that he made.
Love that. Rhode Island as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like I was really excited to do that, and it was just like a great opportunity. And then I started working for City Paper for 14 years after that. It was like my weekly client. Like Joe gave me a lot of work, and I'll always appreciate Joe for that, because I didn't know if I was quite ready to be an editorial illustrator because I'd just done punk posters, But he told me that night, he's like, no, these are illustrations. You're telling stories in these posters. And it's just like a static image that's telling a narrative. It's a story. So I guess my point is that was a situation where the music scene and the art scene and all kind of came together. And I don't know, it was an exciting time to be in Baltimore because I was constantly playing, Baltimore venues. I was constantly doing art for bands. And I felt like back then I knew where every venue was. I knew where every show was. I knew who every artist was. Because my band used to practice across the hallway from this group called Wham City, that they were like an art collective. And that's, I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Deacon, but he's I don't even know how to describe his music, but it's kind of like, it's like electronic and pop and party music, and just describing it that way is going to get me blacklisted from every Baltimore venue probably, because I'm not good at articulating these things. But
you're an illustrator.
Yeah, I'm an illustrator. I don't know.
You're a musician too, so you're in both groups. They could give you some heat.
Yeah, I hope they cut me some slack here. But our first show ever, my old band, the Lexington Arrows, our first show was with Dan Deacon at this warehouse called the Copycat Building. And all these bands came from there. Like also from Wham City came that band Future Islands. Like they came out of that scene. And just like Y Oak and all of these great Baltimore bands, like all used to play at this place, the Copycat Building. And so it was just like, I felt like back then I knew more. But so I played a show a couple of weeks ago. And I was telling my friends, it's like, yeah, I noticed that everyone at our shows is like in their 30s and 40s now. And all the shows start at like 7 p.m. and end at like 10 p.m. now. I'm just like, yeah, you know what? I bet there's still like really cool venues that we just don't know about because like we're just not in the know. We're not in our 20s anymore. So it's just like, because one of my friends is like, yeah, there's just no venues in Baltimore anymore. Like the scene's just not what it used to be. I'm like, no, it probably is. It's just we're older. Older people are coming to our shows because they've aged with us. Like our following has aged with us. So we're playing the same venues we always played, and we love these venues. But there's probably like house shows and basement shows and small like venues with no names that
Baltimore has a lot of that. Has a lot of the underground.
There's so many shows where you have to DM the person to get the address.
Yeah,
and it's like I'm definitely not cool enough to go to those shows. So I'm just like, I'm 43 years old now. I have no idea what's going on in like the
dude. I'm 50 and I got a podcast. I don't get every invite.
Yeah, it's totally fine though, because I think that's kind of just how it should be. Well, I'm not saying that's how it should be. You should be able to be 80, 90 years old and have fun and go to whatever shows you want. But what I'm saying is, I think that people my age back when I was in my 20s were doing their own things too, and that's totally fine. I don't think it makes you any less cool to like, be older and still have your older followings. But I just I have to admit though, I kind of miss those days when I'd go to these random warehouses and see shows, and I just don't know where those shows happening.
I still like what's weird for me on this point is like me, like however I'm constituted, my habits like haven't changed. As a matter of fact, in certain areas they become more extreme, not like in a negative way or anything, but more extreme with music and venues and times. So I need on Monday night, like I'm doing union organizing, dealing with all these issues all day. But on Monday night, I saw Screaming Females and Generación Suicida open up for.
Yeah.
Holy shit. I didn't even know. And it was Monday night and I was like in my vibe and all that stuff was going on. And I find it interesting because like I can't have regular conversations of being like, I'm trying to lead this worker revolt and like at night I'm doing this shit. And like there's not a lot of people that do that. And just like the way that I'm constituted, I need that. That's why I asked like the local scene stuff, because like for me, that's the juice. Chloe, you had indicated that you're like, I think you referred to yourself as a hermit. So I'd like to hear your thoughts, or if not, just tell us like what music you vibe on, because we're talking music and illustration and stuff. And I do a ton of music in the show. So you have an out if you don't want to get into the hermit stuff in your life. Tell us what music you like at least.
Oh, I mean, I am very much a hermit. I don't know. I was not as cool as Alex was or is at my age. So.
Cool is subjective. It's very subjective. I would not classify myself as cool at any moment in my life. But sorry, go.
Actually, Alex introduced me to the magnetic fields via his stories on Instagram.
Oh,
and
cool.
I'm really into that. Really, really been. So I have a Pandora station for that now.
Oh,
and
nice.
And actually, the singer had also done, that same band had done the soundtrack for the audiobooks for a series of unfortunate events, the kids series. And so that's how I was like introduced to that as a kid. I was like, I knew that band. Yeah. They were under the name the Gothic Archies. Mm-hmm. And
that's right.
Yep.
So I was really into that, I have that soundtrack and I would listen to it as a kid and like even sometimes now, even though it's like more geared for kids. But yeah, that was such a gateway into the magnetic fields. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's funny too because you said you didn't even know that was magnetic fields, but you had heard them.
Yeah.
There's so many magnetic field songs I loved when I was younger, and I didn't know who they were. And I didn't get into them until the pandemic, which is really weird, because I was always like into punk rock and stuff like that. And I always knew they were always like kind of on my periphery, and I had friends who liked them, but I just never took that deep dive. But during the pandemic, I just like fell in love with this band. And I totally forgot that I drew a portrait of the lead singer, Stephen Merritt, for an interview he did with a blog, like probably 15 years ago.
Oh,
and like, I don't know why I drew this, but I drew him playing the Brooklyn Bridge like a harp. Like he was just like this giant, and he was playing like the little like spindle things on the bridge. And I didn't even realize that was Stephen Merritt. I remember doing the illustration, and I probably at the time I was just like I read the interview and knew it was magnetic fields and all of that stuff. But that was how detached I was. It was just like any other illustration I was commissioned to do. I'd read the interview. I'd be like, oh, that's a band. I'm drawing this from a band. And I didn't realize how much of a genius he was, how much of a great songwriter he was. And now I wish I could go back in time and just redo that assignment, because I'm just like, his songs, I mean, it's just like some of his songs up there, it's just like, just kill me, I mean, they're just amazing. And like we're talking about communicating and how that's what the foundation of art is. The way he communicates his thoughts, it's like, it's comforting because it's like, I'm thinking some of the same things, and it's cool when you like listen to a song and you're like, oh, I can relate to this. This is amazing. Sorry, I had to go on a little magnetic fields tangent because I love them so much, but I'm sorry. Back to
No.
Your schedule of programming.
Not at all. That was great. And actually, I wanted to ask you because you have drawn so many public figures and celebrities and musicians and all the rest. And I was just curious, have you ever received feedback from them or like heard anything that they said about how you drew them?
Every now and then there's a moment where someone like, I've heard feedback sometimes from musicians that I didn't really know much about, and I appreciate the feedback, but it didn't hit me the way it does when it's someone that you really love.
Oh yeah.
And so a couple years ago, I'd done a drawing of Annie Clark from St. Vincent for an interview she did in Newsweek. So it was like a full page Newsweek illustration. And it's funny, like I've worked with Newsweek exclusively for about 4 years now. And I have a great relationship with the art director, and we usually do political stuff. So when he gave me this assignment, I wanted to send him a gift basket because I was so excited to draw this. It's like St. Vincent's one of my favorite groups. Annie Clark, for my money, is the best guitar player who ever lived. I think her guitar playing is just like, it's different. She's not like a metal guitarist that just can play really fast, like tons of notes and stuff. It's just the way she plays. Her style is just phenomenal. And so when I got this assignment, I put everything into this illustration. I was like up all night trying to make sure everything was exactly how I wanted it. And when the article came out, when the interview came out, she shared it on her Instagram and gave me credit and said she liked the artwork. And I was just like, okay, I can die happy. Like I was calling like everyone I know. And it's just like, because it's not like it's going to result in me getting any more followers or making any more money, but it's just like validation from someone that you respect, like as an artist, like more than like anyone in the world. It's just like that felt really good. And maybe on the other side of the music spectrum, another time when that happened was, and I'm not trying to name drop or anything like that. I feel like kind of stupid saying this stuff, but I had done, I used to do these baseball cards for the Mann Center in Philadelphia. And every time it was with AEG Live that became Bowery Presents. They would promote these shows. They would organize like, tours and things like that. So whenever their shows would come to the Mann, they would ask me to do baseball cards. So every summer I'd probably do about 20 to 25 baseball cards for different concerts. And one of them was Weird Al Yankovic. And I've loved Weird Al Yankovic since I was like, in elementary school. I just think he's one of those people that he does parody songs that sound better than the originals, in my opinion.
American hero, American treasure. He'd be knighted in Britain.
Yeah, oh, definitely, for sure. I mean, he's a national treasure. He's an angel. He's amazing. And so when I did that card, I drew a little spatula in the corner because that was my little UHF Easter egg, because they had this sketch or this part of the movie about something called Spatula City. It was like a store that only sold spatulas. I just always thought that was like the best thing ever. So anyway, I did this baseball card, and that week he was coming to DC too. So Washington Post had me do an illustration of him for his tour, and they did an interview with him. And so I had to do 2 Weird Al illustrations in the same week. So my friend Jen Corsilli, who was working for AEG at the time, I asked her, it's like, is there any way I could just like come up to Philadelphia and meet Weird Al? Because that would be like a dream come true if I could just meet him. And she was like, yeah. So she got us like, almost like front row seats. And then afterwards, I got to go backstage and hang out with Weird Al. And this is this is a moment where I was like, oh, okay, I could die happy now. This is amazing. Just meeting him was great. But when he saw me, I said, hey, Weird Al, I did the artwork for your baseball card. And he said, oh, you're Alex. It's like, it's good to finally meet you. And I was like, you are familiar with me. That's like, I was like a choking up moment, because it's just like, I don't get starstruck by that many people. And this wasn't even a case of being starstruck. It was just like, I just love everything he does so much that just made me really, really happy to know that he was even aware of who I was, And I think every now and then as illustrators, I think we all have those moments where like we connect with someone that you never thought you would connect with. And I think like being an illustrator, it puts you in these scenarios from time to time where you're like, okay, the world just got a lot smaller,
Yeah.
These are people you see on TV, and when I was a kid, you'd see them on MTV or something, and you'd be like, oh, well, they're living a completely different universe than I'm living in. It's like they're breathing different air. They're just like, they're not in the same world. But I think art kind of like brings us together sometimes through these like opportunities that we get. And there's been a handful of times in my life where I'm just like, high school Alex or elementary school Alex would be like losing his mind right now because I never thought I'd get to meet this person or work with this person.
That's just incredible to hear. I thought just recently I had an interview with Susan Tomorrow, who heads the Clinton Street Theater, classic film theater, over 100 years old in Portland, and they just do amazing projects. I just saw an image and a graphic illustration of a John Waters festival, at least 4 to 5 films that they have coming up. He's going to be there in person in Portland. I'm not sure when that is. But the other piece is, when I talked to Susan, we dropped for a bit into Weird Al and UHF, and her showing UHF and the contests and stuff that were related to the show. So I'm like, it's been interesting to hear about these type of things. It's like, I had this conversation recently with Susan. But Alex, tell us about this horror film.
Okay, so the movie is about. I'm not sure if I'm even allowed to say the title yet because it's so.
Do everything legal. I don't always say that. I'm a union organizer. Do everything legal for now.
Yes. So it's a friend of mine's a filmmaker, and him and his wife are both co-directing this movie, and it's a horror film, horror comedy, I guess, because it's about a young couple who is buying a house. But the real estate agent tells them it's haunted, and there's a sort of like a poltergeist or a demon in the house that can possess people. So it becomes like sort of like an Exorcist type movie, but it's also kind of funny. And so all I'll say is this, because this was just a crazy thing that happened. I thought it was going to be a pretty low key, I don't know why I thought a horror movie would be low key, but they blacked out all of my windows, because it was supposed to take place at night.
Oh.
And throughout some of the scenes, there were screaming, like loud screams.
Oh, shit.
There was actually like a love scene that was very like verbally graphic. I don't know. I didn't watch the actual filming because, I felt like I should be like in the other room because, I'm not actually in the film crew. But the sounds, I can't even imagine what my neighbors are thinking today.
Oh.
It was just like way over the top, way like, very explicit in the way it sounded.
Yeah, sure.
And then there was a film crew like camped out in my front yard all day. So I think there's a good chance that my neighbors think I'm shooting porno movies in my house now. It's like, but not just porno movies, like exorcist porno movies or religious porno. Because there was a guy playing a priest and he was doing an exorcism. So you hear like sex noises and an exorcism going on at the same time. And it was so loud because I was outside during a lot of it. You could hear it all the way down the street. So I think I might have to move. I think I just have to pack up my things and just get it.
This is a significant event, and I'm glad you have Chloe and I here for this, because you told us so much in such a short amount of time, and we just met, and I could not be more thrilled and fascinated. First of all, your true lifestyle has been uncovered to your neighbors. It doesn't matter whether it's related to you or not. They now understand what has happened, as that's the thing that we didn't quite get about that guy. So you got that going on.
Yeah.
You got the it's complete black. You got screams. You got Catholicism mixed with sex, which it always is. I don't know where we're going with this. So, Chloe, you had some sort of big question for Alex.
Oh, is this the big one? Is this?
I don't know. You had a big question you told me for him.
Okay, Alex, why is there something rather than nothing?
I think there's something rather than nothing because I think we're always thinking about something. I think being a person, we can't turn off our brains, so there's always something to think about. And as long as we're thinking about something, we're always going to be making something. I think that's what it's about. I don't know about you both, but for me, like, I don't sleep that well at night because I'm always thinking of something that happened during the day, something that I'm having an anxiety about, something that I'm excited about. And I think that manifests into your real life. It's like whatever you think about, you're going to create something about it, and it might not always be good, but it's something that is created because you're thinking of it, and
Yeah.
so for me, like, if we were robots, if we were just, if we didn't have feelings, if we didn't have thoughts or consciousness, we would probably, I mean, even then there's still going to be something because life has to keep continuing. So I guess in a sense, like, you look at bees and ants and they develop these civilizations, these like colonies and hives, and they might not have a consciousness like we do, but they're still creating something beautiful. So I feel like there's something just because we're living things that have to keep living. So we just keep creating things to survive, to be happy, to be sad. I don't know. I hope
Chloe,
right.
was that answer correct?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
He got it right.
When I was thinking about it, I was just like, okay, I don't want to overthink this because
Nah.
there's times I was watching an interview today with Jessica Chastain, and she was talking about filmmaking, and the answer was so schmaltzy that I was like, I hope I don't sound schmaltzy.
Yeah, don't.
Just about the camera looking into your soul. I'm like, okay, don't mention souls. Don't mention just I don't know. I tried to narrow it down to as
Well, there's an easy out. I've been announcing it more regularly. This show is done in the spirit of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series in the 1980s science fiction. And in the book, The Life, the Universe, and Everything, there's an answer to the question of why is this all about, which is basically the why is there something rather than nothing. The answer to this can be 42. And it's the last thing you need to say. So, it's a tough question, but like I've dropped it a few times on the episode now that you can say 42, and I'm going to move into the next question, which Alex, where the hell will we find your stuff? Like website, where's all your stuff?
Yeah, I mean, my main website is just alexfine.com. And my Instagram is at alexfineillos. That's with an S at the end. And yeah, that's basically like all the only places I really exist online. I kind of gave up Twitter. It just, I don't know. It was even before Elon Musk took it over. I just wasn't really feeling Twitter for
I've
a
never
while.
successfully used Twitter. I mean, I've tried. It's the only account that I've had hacked multiple times. Barely use it. I don't know. I never got to start there.
Yeah, definitely. For me, Instagram is great because it's mostly just about visuals.
I love visuals.
Yeah. While internet trolls have found every way possible to start an argument on every social media, I find arguments on Instagram seem to be shorter and more concise.
They're shorter and concise.
Whereas like Twitter and Facebook, you'll read like whole novels full of like people's thoughts, and that's none of my business. I mean, I'm all for arguing with someone about politics and stuff like that if it's in the real world, but I've never changed anyone's mind on social media, and I don't think I ever will. So I save my my political discourse to real life situations.
I've done that myself. Chloe, haven't talked to you in a few weeks before this episode here. Anything going on, or what was the experience like? Doing the podcast. I talked to you at the time, and it was such a great experience, and I'd love to get into it. It's had a bunch of downloads. I think 3,500 downloads so far, and I know you like podcasts as well, Chloe. So like what's been happening just lately with you?
I'm preparing for a lecture at York College, the York College of Pennsylvania. So I just recently finished putting together the slideshow for that, and I'm practicing for that. And yeah, so my workspace has sort of had a lot of flood damage recently from a massive plumbing issue. So there's no floor, and my workspace is kind of very chaotic at the moment. So I'm just focusing on the presentation and preparing for that at the moment.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. That's not proper in the world. That's not proper. That needs to be fixed.
It's a
That's
massive headache.
working conditions issue.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Alex is shaking his head. Alex, it was great to hear when we were chatting a bit before on the show about some of your union work too, and it was really nice to connect with you on that. And I got to tell you, one thing on the show is I've had great experiences in labor. The job at present is more difficult than it's ever been, and I'm also have a developed art side and doing those type of things. But one of the things on the show is I just really want to just stop and say that you've done work as a union member, you've been involved with the union, created a union where you've worked before. And I just really want to honor that. And I also want to say that I believe there's such a tide. There's a generational shift with the attitudes towards unions. And I try to tell everybody who's one generation before me and one below me that less than 30 in the United States of America are not as polluted as a lot of our heads were in Cold War, scare, all this type of weird politics. And there's a bunch of stuff going on right now. But the number one pro-union generation since the time that unions were illegal in the 1920s is this generation. Yeah. So I feel that on labor, and labor's always saying this, but I feel the shift is on. I feel that younger workers have seen some of the working conditions and things that people have experienced. And on some level, it's being shown that they're saying, fuck that noise. Like, I won't accept that. And for me, that's very inspiring. And I just... point of personal privilege, or just like the union work that I do and what's going on. I thought it was a great thing to talk to you and mention that about the work you've done as a union person.
Yeah, when the union started coming about at the college I was teaching at, it was the thing is, I think the reason personally why there's more union activity and support these days is because I think people who patronize, we live in a capitalist society, and the people who are the customers, who are the people who are partaking in our society, are realizing that the people who work as teachers, who work as manufacturers, and even doctors, are realizing the quality of the product that we get isn't what it used to be, but it's costing more. So they're seeing this inequity firsthand. And they know that they're going to graduate into this society where they're going to be likely, affected negatively by it themselves. So, when I was teaching at this art college, it was a fine college, don't get me wrong. But the thing is, a lot of these students are going to go on to get master's degrees so they can teach at colleges. And when they see that their teachers their professors aren't being treated in an equitable way, they're going to think, well, am I going to suffer that same fate? Because very few college professors become tenured professors or full-time. Most
nowadays.
A majority are adjunct professors. And it's done that way very intentionally so that the school doesn't have to offer health benefits, retirement funds, things like that. And
has an impact on academic freedom. What the hell are you going to say in the classroom when you're contracts, the non-contractor jobs?
You have no job security whatsoever. And so when I remember an English professor at the school I was at, he actually used to be in one of my favorite punk bands from the 80s too. He was in a band called Government Issue. And he told me he was in Government Issue. I was like, oh, I knew the singer. The singer and I go way back. And I was like, small world, this is awesome. He's like, well, we're starting a union. And all of a sudden I started hearing like Billy Bragg songs in my head. I was like, okay, it's like I got really into it. I was with one of my friends who was also a teacher at the school, and he wasn't as into the idea. I think he was more like, I get paid what I think is fair. And I'm, that's totally valid, if he feels like he's being treated fairly.
It's America. You can cut your own deal.
Exactly. But for me, I was like, you know what, you're right. Because I never really thought about it until then. Teaching was like a side thing for me. It was just like, it was something I did not for money, but just because I love to teach. But then I started realizing, I started doing the math in my head of how much money my classes were generating. You know, each student was paying $5,000 to take my class. And I was teaching a class sometimes of 20, 25 students. You know, multiply 5,000 times 25. I'm just like, wow, you know, that's a lot of money. And of that, I'm making $3,000 or $4,000 a class. You know, I'm making less to teach the class than one student is paying to take the class. And so I thought to myself, there's something wrong here, because the school gets an endowment, they get donations, they're getting a lot of money to keep the lights on, and the president of the school is making over $1 million. Something's wrong here. And so we had town halls when we were trying to, you know, get a contract going.
Yeah.
And then so we teamed up with SEIU, and we'd have weekly negotiations with the provost and the CFO, and sometimes even the president, you know, and it got a little contentious at times. And
sure,
in the end, we didn't get the result we wanted, and we got very little support from the full-time faculty, because they thought that we were asking for too much. And even though, you know, we had no health benefits and we were making far less than the full-time even per class. And I was even serving on committees, which adjuncts usually don't do, and you don't get paid to do as an adjunct.
Yeah.
So
you're serving.
Yeah, I was, you know, doing all of these things because I love teaching, I love education, I love art. So, but at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, it's like, even if I love doing this, am I being exploited by someone? And that's what it all comes down to. So that kind of got me thinking more in terms of unions in all aspects of every industry, because I just thought, you know, this is what's going on in this country. The quality, you know, if someone doesn't feel valued at their place of work, they're not going to do their best work, you know. And if you're not doing your best work, it affects everyone around you. And if you're a teacher, if you're in education and you're being spread thin because you have to work at 3 different colleges to make $30,000 a year, you're not going to be giving your students the full benefit of your knowledge.
It's impossible. It's a fixed number of time.
Oh,
it's impossible.
And I remember when the outgoing president of this college was part of this town hall, he was trying to talk everyone out of, you know, starting a union, taking the steps to move forward, because we had to have a certain number of signatures to start the union.
Sure.
And so he was trying, you know, he was basically union busting. He's like, let me tell you why this is a bad idea. You're going to lose your jobs. You're going to make less money.
I'll take care of you. Don't worry. Get this third party out of the way. I've always meant to treat you better than I have. I'm learning. Yeah.
He's like, just trust us. You have job security. I'm like, well, no, because we've been told we have no job security in our departments. You know, we've been told that you're disposable, you know. So I stood up during this town hall because I was keeping it pretty cool during this town hall. I was like, I thought the guy was full of shit, but I was like, whatever, you know. It's like he's a president of a college. Of course he's going to be full of shit.
Of course he's.
Yeah, but the thing is, but I wasn't offended yet until one professor stood up. And she is Ivy League educated. She has a PhD. And she said, look, you know, I'm teaching at 3 different colleges and I'm making less than $30,000 a year. And it shouldn't be this way. And what are you going to do to fix it? If we don't start a union, who's going to have our back? Are you really going to pay me more money? Can I trust you? And she was crying. And so his response, oh, no. And then she closed her question with, if I was your daughter, what would you tell me if I had to work this many jobs?
Oh.
Like, what would your advice be? So he said, well, if you were my daughter, I'd advise you not to take part-time work. That was his answer. So like after that, like I had a lot to say. And I think I talked for like 10 minutes after that because I was so pissed off. And then so after the town hall, he went up to me and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, well, I'm really glad you're a successful illustrator because you'll never have a full-time job at this college. And I was like, well, I really feel
point made.
Point
made. Thank you for affirming what I was saying too,
exactly.
Mr. Smart Man.
Yeah, it's a job with no upward mobility. You confirmed what I believe. This is why I got so upset, you know? And I actually appreciated his honesty, but I knew his intention was to make me feel bad. His intention was to let me know that I wasn't as valuable as the other professors at this school. Even though my students were winning competitions constantly, they were getting work. It's still all of that went out the window.
Doesn't matter when it's about adult politics
Yeah.
and other issues. It doesn't matter what the students are doing.
It's very true.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And the incoming president was way more in tune with sensitivities of the professors and everything. I think he is a better president, but it's like when you're part of an organization like a big college that generates a lot of money, it's hard for me to trust anyone completely. It's like you can't take someone at their word, because their job is to make as much money for that school as possible. Their job isn't just to provide the best education. If they don't show profits, they're going to lose their job. The board of trustees will boot them out. And that's the thing, is that was a learning experience for me, because I always thought the president and the provost controlled the school, but it's the board of trustees. It's the people with the money that control the school. And once they feel like it's not a good investment, they'll pull their funds and the school will cease to exist. And I had no idea about that. I thought we could make our impassioned, case to the president, and he'd be like, you know what, you're right. Give us a round of applause and say, you guys are being mistreated. We're going to fix this. But
you proved your point. We accept it.
Yeah.
It can't be denied.
That was not the case at all, because what happened was, every meeting we'd have, meeting we'd have with their lawyer, we had our SEIU lawyer, they had their private lawyer. We'd have these long, 1, 2, 3 hour meetings where we would vent. We'd be like, hey, we're being mistreated, and let me tell you why. And by the time it was all done, it just wasn't what we wanted at all, and it wasn't SEIU's fault. It was just, there's not much you can do with the board of trustees. They can say, hey, if you want to strike, we don't care, because they knew that there'd be unlimited amounts of young, hungry teachers who wanted to take that job for less money.
Tough labor situation.
It's very tough. Yeah, because it's not like a job like if you work in manufacturing, if you shut down one day of manufacturing, that really screws up that business. But when you're an art teacher, they're like, okay, someone can walk in tomorrow, and we can just tell them, come up with a curriculum overnight. And a lot of young artists can do that, because that's kind of what we do anyway, because our jobs are so they're so unpredictable. You don't know if you have a teaching job from one semester to the next. So a lot of times I found myself writing a syllabus weeks before the semester started, because I didn't know if I was going to have a job, and so I feel like, in that case, unfortunately, we just didn't have the leverage we needed to get a good contract, ratified. But we still tried, and that's all you can do is try.
Yeah, and as we know, teacher working conditions are student learning conditions. So, Chloe, I'm excited to tell folks that you're going to be back to co-host as well in the future. I think you have a special Baltimore illustrator, we're using a secret East Coast weapon all the way from here in Oregon, and I know it should be quite enjoyable. This is special for me. I don't do a lot, with the co-host, and just haven't talked to Chloe just recently, and getting into all these really amazing topics. I wanted to thank you both for an art conversation, and just to let you know too, when you get into and talking to illustration and that stuff, I'm such a deeply curious person, because I don't have contact with, and you're having that conversation with me. And so for me, I truly learn during that. So that's my interaction with you. And I just wanted to really appreciate your time in doing that. And to thank you both for coming on to the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a great pleasure. Mad respect for Baltimore. I almost got kicked out of Camden Yards once, and I should have been. Boston Red Sox fans are the most obnoxious people in the world. I'm a Boston Red Sox fan. I got a tattoo I'm showing. You won't be able to see it on the podcast. Obnoxious loud. And at that time, I was a drinker, which I'm not anymore. So sorry, Baltimore.
It's
sorry.
Okay. I have to admit.
Sorry, center field bleachers, 1998.
It's totally okay. My father's from Brockton, Massachusetts.
Brockton.
And so, his best friend growing up was Peter Marciano, Rocky's little brother. And that's how old my dad is. He's 84 years old. But he grew up, he ate dinner at the Marcianos all the time. And so he's a lifelong Red Sox fan. He spent many days in Fenway. And so he made me by proxy a Red Sox fan too. I'm still more of an Orioles fan. But I remember going to a game once where I always liked Dustin Pedroia a lot. He was always one of my favorite, when he was playing, he was one of my favorite baseball players. So he hit a home run at the game I went to. And I had to stand up and clap. And everyone hated me. All my Orioles friends definitely want me to sit down. They were embarrassed, but you have to give respect where it's due. And I still like that.
It's just weird when, and I have a lot of respect for Baltimore Orioles, and sometimes in beautiful park, and and for me it's just within the division, it's kind of like a pretty second cousin, I know you're cool, and everything, it's just all too weird, you're too close to Rhode Island, it's all just so strange, but thank you for reaching us from Baltimore. Chloe, I hope they fix your working conditions here. I'm a union guy. Maybe there needs to be a letter and get your floor in how you work in your environment is not optimal right now, but you're so skilled. I'd imagine you're just going to have to do your lecture and then get back to illustration, right?
Yeah. Apparently the clog was in the city lines because somebody was flushing rags down their toilet, and there were tree roots and all manner of other things, and they had to clean it out twice before it was actually fixed. So
I'm not sure if this is a metaphor for America or anything like that, but
well, I'll leave you with this. Baltimore is the only city in America, I think, that had a problem with something called a fatberg. Do you remember this? It was
I do.
Yeah, it was just a combination of all this stuff that just accumulated in the sewer lines and was clogging the pipes. So I got to draw a living fatberg, and I made it look like a California raisin. It was surfing out of the pipe.
Oh my god! I have not seen this.
I'll have to show you that illustration sometime.
Definitely. Yes,
we're gonna have it. We're gonna have it in the show links, folk. As you can see, we could continue this for another couple hours. It's been a great discussion. Thank you, Chloe Niclas, for co-hosting. Alex Fine, super pleasure to meet you. Everybody, check out both of their art, their illustrations. Check out their websites. Just fantastic type of things. Fantastical Golden Girls on Alex Fine's side. Concert. Music, outer space concepts, and ocean with Chloe. Everybody, check them out. Thank you both for being on, and Chloe, you and I are going to be on again soon, and we'll announce that episode. Chloe's back on as co-host. Love you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing.